battle.
Ciao Juventini and welcome to La Storia Bianconera. I'm Zachy, Turin Giants' resident historian and also the village idiot. My first introduction to Italian football came in Germany 2006 with the World Cup victory led by the likes of Del Piero, Buffon, and Pirlo. Before that, I'd never been exposed to Italian football before. My family simply didn't grow up with it. Despite growing up playing football, I'd never really been exposed to calcio outside of the country. Yeah, there was MLS, but at the time I wasn't really into it and I didn't really know how to follow it. It wasn't until I started working at an Italian restaurant in 2012 that I actually discovered the beauty of Italian calcio. I looked for my absolute favorites. I looked for Marchisio, I looked for Buffon, I looked for Pirlo, I looked for Del Piero. And in doing so, I discovered the old lady and I haven't looked back. Outside of that remarkable period of this storied club, first thing to grab my attention was very simple: the iconic look. The Bianconera, the black and white. You could say it was love at first sight. How did that crest that all those players brought to their lips actually come to be? Naturally, I had to know where it came from. So, here we go. This is the Juventus crest, from its earliest incantations to its modern design. Forza. The earliest crest comes in 1905, shortly after adopting our signature black and white, the Bianconera. The crest has the general design of most of the earliest crests that you saw in world football, very much bearing a design that wouldn't look out of place in a provincial crest, which would make sense considering that most historians don't view modern Italy as being unified until throughout World War I. Despite this, some of the elements that you would find to be staples of some of our most iconic designs actually originate here, such as the oval shape, the vertical stripes, and the name across the top third. Adorning the top comes a Latin phrase that translates to "He will not be crowned unless he has legitimately contested," though it quickly fell out of favor with the club and ladder design. 1921 saw the banner disappear, and more late 19th century design actually get dropped in favor of a look that would carry us all the way through up into the 1970s. Gold was adopted as a means for providing more distinct shape to the design, while the blue was adopted as background for the bull, toro in Italian, the historic symbol of Torino, meant to represent power and the fighting spirit of its people. The blue may seem a bit random to those who are unfamiliar with Italy's history. In brief, the color is viewed as being a symbol of royalty and honor from the House of Savoy, which brought about the process of unification of Italy starting in the 1860s. And aside, this is why the Azzurri play in Savoy blue, even though this iteration of this crest seems to use a more neutral blue. 1929 brought on a very short-lived change in design, in which the accented coloration was actually substituted for just black and white design. The general shape, however, of the crest remained. This time, the six-sided framing with the bull in the center is totally dropped in favor of a zebra, which coincides with one of the more obvious, yet lesser-used nicknames, La Zebra, or the Zebras. 1931 brought back the design from 21, this time incorporating the Savoy blue into the crest with a more stylized font choice, creating an image that would become iconic in world football. Now, a caveat with this next section. There are some crests floating around from the early 1960s that definitely abandoned convention, with crest shapes and outlines that vary to certain degrees that I've never seen before. Even after hours of scouring the internet and exploring even the most obscure internet sites about Juventus, I could hardly find anything that corroborate with the original source of these images. I even reached out to Juventus' official website and hoping I can get a little bit more extra information about these things. And what I got was a very polite message that basically directed me to an Italian country code phone number. I guess I'll be making a long distance call. So Juventini, this is where I need your help. If you know anything about the various crests that you've seen in this video, be sure to drop a comment below. Take the teacher to school. It would certainly be very appreciated. Speaking of unconventional, the crests presented in 1977 and 1982 were definitely different. Resembling something that looks like it probably would have fit on a luxury car of this era, the out-of-phase look is certainly unique and pretty cool if you ask me. And it makes sense that the 1982 badge would stay with the team through the rest of the 80s. It certainly was a design of its time. And that's not a bad thing. Personally, I think it'd be really cool if Juventus leaned into this aesthetic from time to time, perhaps in the releases of their core or their iconic collection, which takes us to the 1989-1990 design, which brought Juventus back to a more traditional look with updated coloration and lining. The star shape, bull, and crown are reintroduced, and 2 stars were added on top to symbolize the 20-plus Serie A titles in Juventus' history. To many, this is a crest that symbolizes Juventus as a world power, a juggernaut that opponents feared at any stage. Just ask those Man United boys. Even by today's standards, it looks beautiful and sets the high water mark of traditional footballing crests. 2004 brought a refresh to this crest, as the new millennium did with so many other brands and sporting logos. Seen here, they subbed out the golden outline for black and swapped it for a golden accentic line underneath the Juventus. The star with the bull was replaced with a shield that was colored black instead, while the stripes were detached from the border, despite it being associated with some tough years. It also accompanied a time period of unprecedented Italian dominance, with 8 of 9 consecutive Serie A titles coming under this badge. In so many ways, this crest still looks brilliant to me, albeit it doesn't carry that classic look that you would see in the 90s logo. And a lot of this does come down to bias, because this is the time in which I took on Juventus as being my club. And this was the era in which a lot of my favorite formative players would give their blood for the old lady. Players such as Claudio Marchisio, Giorgio Chiellini, and Carlos Tevez, just to name a few. 2017 saw perhaps the most tremendous push away from tradition with regards to a couple of different things. This was the first time in history that Juventus actually pivoted away from having their designers in-house create the logo, and instead went to third-party designer Interbrand to design their next crest. Former CEO Andrea Agnelli described this crest as being representative of a Juventus way of life. The flat, minimalist design is one that has certainly dominated modern marketing and branding, and for a club that sought to transcend simply being a footballing entity and something more, it was a pragmatic choice. However, how significantly it deviates from tradition has definitely left a sour taste in many mouths. It's corporate and calculated, leading many of its critics to argue that it lacks any sort of feel or heritage associated with the great city of Torino. One change in 2022 saw the name Juventus get struck out of the logo entirely, leaving just the stylized J. Where do you stand, Bianconeri? Be sure to leave us a comment below and tell us which crest you think symbolizes Juventus the best. And be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more La Historia Bianconera. Once again, I'm Zaki, and as always, it's fino alla fine, Forza Juventus. I'll see you next time.